Hey guys, I think we can start soon. It's gonna be a pretty small crowd today. I feel I didn't know that they were having the honors mixer today, so it's gonna be somewhat of a small crowd. But we'll be recording this session, just an FYI for future reference for people to kind of look back at this talk and kind of see what we discussed. For those that did miss it, but we can start soon. I'll just share my screen real quick and get started with the presentation. Um, Dad, if you'd like to kind of like unmute yourself and also you turn on your camera, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, so let's let people trickle in. As time goes by. The honors mixer, I didn't know that it conflicted with this, but as the talk goes by, I think we should have more people come in. But this is part of our day in a life series. So throughout the year, we'll be having multiple professionals coming in to kind of talk about what they do and what their day-to-day operations look like, so you can kind of see what your future career looks like, or kind of find prospective careers that you'd like to pursue in the future. So our first talk is a physical therapist. And luckily, he's my dad. It's Kevin Elgar. He's a registered physical therapist, um, and he's more than willing to kind of share his experience with us. So, just starting off. Our agenda will be, kind of an introduction for about, let's say 10, 15 minutes, and then we have some questions just to kind of start the conversation. Oh shoot. And also, we'll be having some questions and answers from the audience for the last 20 to 30 minutes. So, just starting off, we'll start off with the introduction. His name is Kevin Elgar, not to be confused with my name, Kelvin. Kevin Elgar was educated from Fatima University in Valenzuela City, Philippines, and graduated with a BS in physical therapy in the class of 1997. And he has had a lot of experience, as you can see. He has a very extensive resume and has worked for multiple companies and organizations. Currently, my dad is the president and owner of the 5K Amputee Physical Therapy Services in Beaumont, Texas. He is also a staff physical therapist, starting in 2020 to currently right now, for Center Rehab and Focus Care Rehab in Beaumont, Texas. He was a physical therapist for Legacy Healthcare in Beaumont, Texas from 2009 to 2013, a physical therapist for Kindred Healthcare in Wausau, Wisconsin from 2005 to 2009, a physical therapist from 2007 to 2009 for Golden Ventures Rehab / AG's Therapy in Wausau, Wisconsin. He was also a clinical professor from 2003 to 2005 in the Global Care and Nursing Services and Training Center in the Philippines. He was also a physical therapist from 2002 to 2004 in the Pain and Rehabilitation Care Group Company in the Philippines. He also worked for the RS Rehab Special Center Pascual General Hospital in the Philippines. And from 1999 to 2000, he worked for the Royal Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as their physical therapist. And before that, from 1997 to 1999, he worked as a physical therapist in the Manila Sanitarium and Hospital in the Philippines. And his first role starting off his career was a role as a physical therapist for the Advanced Olongapo Physical Therapy and Orthopedic Clinic in the Philippines. So you can see that, he's had a lot of different roles in a lot of different sectors of physical therapy. He's worked a as a regular physical therapist. He's worked overseas. He's worked as a professor, as well as seen the business side of physical therapy. Um, Before we start, it'd be great, if you can share some words with us, Dad.
Well, first of all, good evening and thanks for inviting me, Kelvin. And it's really my pleasure to be here tonight. And I do hope I can share some points or knowledge to some of the listeners or who's watching right now. Yeah, it's a it's a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Sam.
Sounds good. So, let's just dive, straight into it with our prepared questions. And if you do have some questions, again, it's pretty lax. Don't be afraid to drop it in the chat while we're doing these questions, and we'll answer your question as soon as uh, Mr. Elgar completes the question that's been prepared. Um, so yeah, I mean, like, you're starting off that, to warm everything up. Can you kind of share your journey to becoming a physical therapist? If you can kind of share how you became a registered, physical therapist, how you came from the Philippines to America,
Oh,
as your education and what you did for school.
okay. Well, truly, first of all, I really want to be a lawyer, just for the record. But of course, I end up to be in the physical therapy world. Um, during those times, physical therapy was very in demand, going to any part of the world coming from the Philippines. First, of course, you have to be in the top of your class and then get your licensure from the Philippines where you came from. And then you have to fulfill some requirements and experiences. As you can see, I have to have a lot of experiences before I applied to go here and work for Uncle Sam or in the United States. Um, After getting my licensure exam in the Philippines as a licensed therapist back home, I went to Saudi Arabia. It's actually for a royal family. I was first in the Riyadh National Hospital, and then they took me as a private for the royal family. It was a good experience. And then after that, before coming to the United States, I have to take 4 major English exams because you can't just come from the Philippines, just suddenly come here. Now you have to make sure you're efficient to come over, not just as a therapist, but also the way you language or the way you speak. So luckily, Kindred Healthcare took me. They coming from Saudi Arabia. I was a professor back home. I received a phone interview with Kindred Healthcare. Maybe some of you have heard of this company. They're the one who took me in the state of Wisconsin. That's where they got my temporary license for the time being. While after I passed my 4 English major exam, we call that the test of English, test on English proficiency language, test on written English, test on speaking English. Actually, three major English exam. I'm sorry, three. So after that, I took my licensure exam in Wisconsin, but it's not that easy because in Wisconsin, being a foreign trained, even though I passed the written exam, I have to take the oral exam. It's just like doing a revalida or a thesis. Like you sit in a long table, or in the state board is there, a group of rehab people is there, even a patient, a social worker, all walks of life as part of the rehabilitation team. And then they throw you 30 questions, and out of the 30 questions, you have to at least answer 27 of them correctly, orally, defend it to them. Like they give you a situation about patients, different kind of patients. So luckily, I passed that, the oral exam. So they released my license. So I practiced in Wisconsin. And then after that, after practicing then, I have to have reciprocity to move to Texas because we have some family friends here, or my best friends also therapists here in the Southeast Texas area. Um, they have to compare my grades uh, doing my physical therapy while in school in the Philippines to students here in Texas, specifically in University of Texas in Austin. Because during my time, uh, the only way you can get here is to go there and go to this one specific person, a professor there, to check on your grades, your transcript of records. They compare that to your to students, therapy students or pre-physical therapy students from Texas. So they want to weigh it down if my brain cells were capable to go to to Texas. So anyhow, luckily again, I was given a chance. They said I'm capable to practice in Texas. So I got my license here, and there it was. And that started my career in Texas. So that's how it is. That's how I end up here in the United States.
It sounds good, Dad. So coming off of that, then, um, does anyone have any questions or concerns that they have about my dad's response? By the way. Um, if not, we can move on to the next question. And again, just a reminder, everyone, you can drop your questions in the chat, and we'll answer them as soon as we finish, the question that we're on. So, Dad, can you kind of share what you do in your day-to-day responsibilities? Like, what's your routine, every single day? And in your current role right now, like,
Well, since it's the pandemic, I've been focusing more on the skilled nursing facility, which of course we all know it's what you call nursing home. Uh, the day-to-day routine varies. Excuse me, it depends on the load of the facility and how many physical therapists are available or already there, and available occupational therapists or available speech therapists. So luckily right now I have three assistants, which they changed that ruling now, because before you can only have two assistants, but then now you can have as much as you can, as long as you were able to supervise them. So going back to the day-to-day thing, the responsibilities, you have to make sure that your assistants are doing their job, they're following your treatment plan, and then that all their paperwork is being done on time. Because at the end of the day, they don't look for the assistant, they look for the physical therapist, which is me. I want to make sure that my assistants are doing the treatment plan that I signed for that patient, for a certain patient. And I try to ask them questions in the morning, or if they have concerns that they want to ask me before the start of the day. So basically, it's like that. Just have to ask them and always make my assistant feel that I'm always there for them. That way, everything will be running smoothly in the rehab. And on my part, on my own patient too, I have to find time to talk to the nurses and check if there's some changes on my patients, if they had a fall or they had some low blood sugar, or they have taken their seizure medicine, or if there's some family who needs some to have questions for the physical therapist, those kind of stuff. It's a matter of, it's the walk of life. What, anything under the sun about physical therapy will all end up to me on that day. So truly the day-to-day thing is depending on the situation. But just make sure you always come prepared. You don't want to go to the You don't want to go to work without not prepared.
Oh yeah, my dad knows that, right?
Yeah.
um, but yeah, Dad. Thank you for that answer. Again, can you kind of like walk us through what you do for like your checkups, if you can, just to kind of like walk us through it.
Oh, like yeah, like for example, you mean for before the nursing will make a decision not most of the time make a decision like for the activity of the patient, we have to evaluate the patient. The physical therapist's responsibility on a day-to-day basis, part of it is to give advice and make a note on the progress of the patient or the contraindication of the patient, especially if they're fresh coming from the hospital. Most especially those orthopedic case like knee replacement, hip replacement, or any replacement they had, or hip fracture, all that all end up to the physical therapy to make sure to pass on the message to everybody on the rehab team and to the skilled nursing to guide them so that the patient will be taken care of properly, like the weight bearing status, the contraindications, uh, if the cut of the hip replacement is in the posterior, the back part of the hip or in the front part, you have to explain to them how to position the hip. If the shoulder is replaced, if the shoulder only have a nail, they did the open reduction fixation of the shoulder, fixation of the hip or knee, anything. It all depends on the physical therapy. It will give them guidance on how to handle them.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Oh, and in addition to that, I forgot. You also have to make sure that if you have assistants, you have to make sure that they're doing their job because that's your responsibility. No matter what, you have to know, you have to make sure they're doing it correctly, that the treatment plan is being followed because that's very important. Even though I'm not the one who handle them because they're my assistants, you have to make sure that they follow what you want them to do.
Okay, thank you for that, Dad. Thank you. Um, so next question is, you know, throughout your career, I know you've seen a lot of things, Dad. You've worked in different companies, but out of all the skills that you've learned and from what you've seen, what do you think is the most important skill to develop to become a successful physical therapist?
Um, you have to always, what I did all the time is whenever I treat a patient, I always put myself onto them. Like, I want to treat this patient like I'm treating my own self. Because if I will be in that same age, I'll be in that situation, I want to be treated accordingly. That's the number one thing that I always put in my mind whenever I handle a patient. And most of all, of course, I pray before I see a patient. By the way, I need to say that first. I always pray before I see a patient, and then after that, I always make it to a point that I treat them like I'm treating my own self, like I am them, and I am a different therapist because I want to be treated properly too. And then you have to treat every patient the same, not because they are the daughter of this or the son or the uncle or the owner of that company. No. For me, when I see a patient, it all depends on what's the past what's the history from the hospital record says. It doesn't matter if he's the president of this or the president of that. You just have to do the right thing all the time. Always do the right thing. And learn to listen properly with the patient, because most of the time there's a lot of therapists that depend on the book, but sometimes what's in the book is not really the one that you're gonna see there. Maybe the same name. Oh, I had a knee replacement. Oh, maybe he had a stroke. But it always varies because it all depends on the sign and symptom of the patient. So you have to make sure you're listening when because when you evaluate the patient, you talk to them. Not unless they are comatose, that's a different situation. It will depend on the records. So it's a case-to-case basis, but one more thing that you need to remember is you learn how to listen to the patient so that you know what they feel. And from there, all the knowledge in your brain, on your mind, I should say, experiences, everything will gonna build up in your mind and set up something for a treatment plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
So just going off of that question, can you give an example of when you had to listen instead of following the book?
It's too many. It's really hard to make a specific about that. But let's make it this way. Yeah, that's a good one. I'll be more so that it can easily be understand, or maybe in the anatomical way. But I know not everybody is in the healthcare, right? Who's listening? Let's make it, for example, a hip replacement. I come to the room. I go to the room of the patient, and then I saw it's a hip replacement. And by the book, it's a hip replacement automatically because the professor said that uh, you're not supposed to abduct your legs. Excuse me. You don't externally rotate your leg. It's hard to explain that in a layman, but it's a movement of a patient of the leg when you had a hip replacement. You by the book know the word hip replacement, but when you were talking to the patient, because yeah, sir, you had a hip replacement, this and that, and then she said, yeah, they did a posterior approach because you didn't listen. You just, oh, I know this is hip replacement, but they did a posterior approach. So what you follow is the opposite contraindication, and then when you move that leg, it popped. You'll hear that because it's gonna be detached from the acetabulum. It's basically what I'm saying is if the way most of the time is like, for example, you read the approach was on the anterior aspect on the front, the contraindication will be the opposite of the contraindication if the approach the other way. I hope it's making sense. So you have to listen to them, to the patient himself or herself. Then after that subjective, or after that, then you do your palpation. You kind of check what he said. Because if you only go by the book, hip replacement itself, and you didn't further think what's the approach that the surgeon did, then you can put that patient in danger or making that hip replacement in a bad situation. It can cause you more problem.
Thank you, Dad.
That, that's the most simple explanation I can say there, because of in the physical therapy, especially in the orthopedic case.
Thank you, Dad, for that. Does anyone have any concerns or questions right now about any of the questions that my dad answered? Or does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask right now? Okay.
Yeah,
Moving on.
yeah, feel free to ask question. I hope I can answer it good.
So the last prepared question is, uh, what is your biggest piece of advice for a rising undergraduate looking to go into physical therapy school? I know that you graduated from physical therapy school, Dad, like 100 years ago, Dad. You're really old.
I,
I'm
you're
really,
right. Uh-huh.
no, I'm kidding, but I'm sure that like still going into physical therapy school. there's still kind of the same, requirements, as well as the same skills that are needed. So, again, what is the biggest piece of advice you have for these undergraduates?
Well, the main thing is always work hard. Hard work is the number one thing. And keep your grades high all the time, because at the end of the day, they always get the cream of the crop. So keep a higher grade all the time to be competitive. Not just because I graduate from another country that I'm competing with other therapists, but the way I hear right now in the United States is after doing the pre-physical therapy nowadays, they pick among the pre-physical therapy student who can get into the program. So if you maintain a good grade all the time, or how do you say, the good GPA?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I know it's hard. Some will say, well, it's easy to say, well, you want to be a physical therapist or in any course. Let's just say, and you really have to be very competitive on the grades. That's the number one thing that I always does when I was in the physical therapy school is keep that GPA high, and when it comes to the school, you always have to be willing to be taught. You have to be teachable as a student. You have to be also flexible as a student, so you can make any adjustments, because that's how it is when you go to the physical therapy proper or in the program. You have to be flexible. You can just be oh, I just want to be focusing on the neuro. I just want to be focusing on this. No, you have to anything about in the physical therapy. They all interconnect, coming from the muscle, nerve, tendon, ligaments, joint, everything. So you have to be flexible on any topics so you learn more, and that's what's gonna make you become a better physical therapist. And the willingness to be teach, and do not be shy to ask from the professor.
I
I
think.
think I hope yeah, that's just the basic thing. Basically, I think it's not just for physical therapy. If you're gonna apply that to any course, that's what you need.
Well, thank you, Dad, for all those answers to the prepared questions. So, if you guys have any questions that you'd like to voice out right now, or have any concerns about any of the four questions that we did ask, um, do not be afraid to, open up, because you are opening up the floor now to everyone to kind of ask questions. You can unmute yourself if you want, drop your question in the chat, and I could read it to my dad where he can answer it. So just right now, if you have any concerns about anything, my dad will try his best to answer it for you. So if there aren't any questions, I think we can, end the talk now. Again, I just want to say thank you to my dad, Mr. Elgar, for coming out and speaking tonight. I know that you're very busy, Dad, so I'm really grateful that you were able to kind of kick off this first talk in our series. And also, Again, this is going to be a series of talks, so we will be having more talks like this in the future from different professions. So make sure to tune in on those as well. So yeah, thank you for coming out, and again, thank you, Mr. Elgar, for coming out and sharing your experience as a physical therapist.
All right.
Thank you, Dad. Yeah, I think we'll just be ending the call now. But yeah, I mean, like, we'll share this recording to everyone. They'll put in the honors group chat essays. Again, there was another event happening.